Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to make some meals using pantry items that I haven't used in a while. Specifically, I'm looking at this orzo pasta and thinking about a delicious cold salad that I used to eat at Barron's Market. I'd like to try to recreate that, and I remember it had sun-dried tomatoes, which I also have on hand. I'll start by cooking my orzo pasta. I remember it was a yellow, tangy salad with the orzo and some olives and tomatoes and I think green onions. So I'm going to go ahead and add salt and turmeric to the water because I'm sure that that's how they achieved the yellow color. And then I'm going to boil the orzo pasta for about 9 minutes. And since this is my first time making this salad, I'm going to just start with 1 cup of orzo pasta, and then we'll see how much I like it. Maybe next time I'll double the recipe. While that's cooking, I'll make my dressing and cut up the rest of my vegetables. I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of oil. Obviously, if you have olive oil, that would be great here. Maybe use an extra virgin, which is going to be a little lighter in flavor. Although I do love the flavor of regular olive oil as well. But anyway, that's up to you. I'm actually out of olive oil, so I'm using avocado, which is a little thicker. But any oil will do. And then I'm going to add in some red wine vinegar, and I'm going to use 1.5 tablespoons. Again, you can use any vinegar. I do like red wine vinegar. I think it's great for salads. I love the flavor. And then I'm going to use some Dijon mustard, and I'll add about 1/2 teaspoon. This is just going to be a great emulsifier for the dressing. And so that's going to hold everything together. And then I'm adding 1/8 teaspoon, a little under 1/8 teaspoon, so probably like 1/10 teaspoon of salt, but you can add however much you like. And then I thought I would add a very small clove of garlic in here. And I'm going to add it in to the mixture and let it sit for a while so that that vinegar can help to tame the garlic a little bit. And then I'm going to give this a taste, and it tastes pretty good actually right now. So I'll set that aside and then check on my pasta. And this is actually ready. So I'm going to go ahead and drain this and let this cool. Okay, and I realized because I don't cook orzo very often, I should not have left this in the strainer. I should have drained it and then put it back into the pan because it did start to stick to my strainer. So I would remember that next time. I like to keep sun-dried tomatoes in my pantry just because they're so good for so many different uses. And I got these at Trader Joe's. These are the kind that are just dry, and you can add them directly into salads like this, or you can add them to a little water to get them a little moisture. But I'm going to just cut these up, and these will go into my cold salad. Like I said, I remembered that these were one of the main ingredients in that Barron's salad that I used to love so much. It's not just Barron's that had this salad. I've seen it around, but I really couldn't find any similar recipes online. Here I'm using just plain black olives in a can. I think I got these at Winco. But there was also another very popular orzo salad recipe on New York Times, and it had like 5-star reviews. It was very popular. So I kind of looked at that recipe, and it had a few extra ingredients in there, and it wasn't a yellow salad. I just remember that very distinct yellow color. And I think the olives in that one were sliced kind of small. So I'm going to cut up a few pieces that are a little bit smaller. I'm just playing around here with this recipe. I think I'll start out with 2 green onions and then see how that works out. I'm just going to add everything to the bowl and then kind of eyeball it and then add more of the ingredients that I need. I think the New York Times recipe had red onions, but the one that I remember had green onions. And I love using green onions because they're always mild. They don't overpower the salad, but yet they give it some crunch. Not as much crunch as the red onion, but I think that this is going to be perfect. And I love adding the green to the salad. And I'm trying a little sample dish just to see how this tastes before I add all of the ingredients into the big bowl. And I did decide to add the sun-dried tomatoes to some hot water just to let these sit for a minute before I add those to the salad. I've learned that it's always a good idea to try a little bowl as a sample in case you don't like the way like the dressing tastes all together with it. And so anyway, I tried this and it was delicious. However, there was something missing from the original recipe that I remembered from Barron's Market. I mean, it was really good on its own, don't get me wrong, but there was just something missing. So I had to think about it for a while, but then I realized it was a little bit sweeter and a little tangier. So I think it was actually some balsamic vinegar that was in there because it was also a little bit darker. So I decided to add some balsamic vinegar into the mix and then see what I thought. And when I stirred this up, I realized I wanted to add a few more of the sun-dried tomatoes. So I cut up a few more and added those to the salad, and then I was ready to add the dressing in. And at this point, I hadn't yet added the balsamic vinegar in because I was still thinking about what it was missing, but I did add it in later and it ended up being perfect. And because I wanted to make this a whole meal, I decided to add in some chickpeas just to give it some additional protein and fiber and make it more of a complete meal. And the original recipe at Barron's also had in some feta cheese. I don't have any feta, so I'm not going to add that in, but if you want to add that in, you can. Feta always goes so nicely with sun-dried tomatoes. Goat cheese is great too. So whatever you have on hand, you can add, but I'm not adding any cheese to mine. The New York Times recipe had some cucumbers added to theirs, and so I kind of toyed with the idea of adding some to mine. I thought it would add a nice crunch, but when I actually tested it out with a sample, I realized that the water content of those cucumbers was so high that it detracted from the delicious flavor of the orzo pasta salad. So at the end, I decided just to leave them out. And I'm actually wondering if I even needed the red wine vinegar at all, or maybe if I just should have swapped that out with the balsamic, because I added quite a bit more of the balsamic in, and that's going to be, a personal taste basis. I like mine kind of vinegary. It just went really nicely with the chickpeas and with the sun-dried tomatoes. I did have to play around with the ingredients a little bit. I ended up adding a total of 4 of the green onions, and that seemed to be perfect with 1 cup of the orzo. But again, that's probably just a personal taste. You can make yours however you like. I'm going to be perfecting this recipe this summer. I need to make this a few more times, and then I can measure out and know exactly how much of the ingredients, for like the olives and the sun-dried tomatoes that I like to add into this. I'm going to put this in the fridge for tomorrow, and then I'm going to give it a try. This was so delicious, you guys. I love this. I'm going to be eating this all summer long. You know what? This is not only good for just eating yourself. This is great for like a summer picnic or one of those occasions where you need to bring something to work for a potluck. And I love the fact that it's a 1-dish meal. For my next meal, I wanted to use some of this elbow macaroni. Sometimes if I'm tired or hungry or I don't know what to make, a pasta dinner always sounds nice, and I like to make these big 1-pot meals. The ingredients always vary depending on what I have on hand, but I usually like to use either some kind of greens or broccoli. Today I decided to use some of this kale, and sometimes I use a different kind of pasta. Today elbow macaroni just sounded really good to me, and the water is salted, so everything that I put in there is going to be perfectly seasoned. I cut up this asparagus because I got this at Sam's Club, and so I've just been eating a little bit of this every day. I just fried that with a little bit of oil and added just a touch of soy sauce to that. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my greens in. If I were using spinach in this, I would add the spinach at the very end and just kind of let it steam in the mixture when I stir it together. But this kale has these thick stalks, so I need to cook those for a little bit to get this tender. And then, as you guys know, I do love tomatoes, but I selected these sun-dried tomatoes out of my pantry as one of the pantry items. And I do love these. They make so many different meals taste delicious, and actually they're really the ingredient that puts a lot of dishes over the top for me. So I am excited to be using these. I kind of forgot that these were in my pantry. I've made this dish lots and just added cherry tomatoes in as well. And I just added those to the water so that they can kind of get a little bit more moist. You can eat them right out of the bag and add them to salads and things like that. But I thought it would be good just to add them to this water so that they get a little bit more moist. And then that's pretty much done. I love that this meal comes together so quickly. I'm going to go ahead and add some cheese. I've been loving this mozzarella, so I thought I would add just a few chunks of mozzarella into this. I've made this before with the Fiesta blend from Walmart. It only takes a very small amount, so this ends up being quite an affordable dish. But I'm just using the cheese that I have, and I also have some Parmigiano Reggiano. I have a big block of that. Well, it was a big block at one time, but that lasts me months and months and months, and I'll just add a small amount to the pasta, and it adds so much flavor. I really do love it. It's one of my favorite cheeses, and sometimes I will just, shave off some pieces, and then it adds like a chewy texture to the pasta when I blend it in. But I've got the mozzarella here, so I'm just shredding this into smaller pieces. And this is actually ready. I'll just add a touch of pepper to this, I think, and then that's going to do it for me. And I was planning to eat the asparagus on the side, but I later just threw it into the dish, and I'll show you a shot at the end. I'm not sure why I didn't add it into this pan. For me, I'm usually just cooking for one, so when I buy something like a big bag of the asparagus, then that means I usually need to eat, some of that, a little bit of that every day, so that I'm able to use it in time. But I do love asparagus, so that works out for me. But any vegetables really work in this dish, like whether it be carrots, mushrooms, broccoli. You could really do anything. I decided to add in the asparagus here, and I'm so glad I did because it really added a lot to this dish. This was so good. I loved it so much that I made it the next night. I didn't have enough of the elbow macaroni, so I used spaghetti noodles. I used the kale again, and I dropped in some dried mushrooms, and I used some more of the sun-dried tomatoes. And it was so good. And it's good with or without the cheese. I love the way everything is just perfectly seasoned. I did add a little turmeric to the water. You can notice here that my spaghetti has a vibrant color. Yeah, I love this meal. It is something that I could find myself eating every single night. It's just that good. And that concludes this week's video. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I'll see you next week.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on my own. Even in the darkest times, you give me hope. So